Well, it's been a long time since I've uploaded a video. That's because I've been on holiday in China for the past month and a half. But we are back at it, and the most recent book that I've read is Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And what inspired me initially to read the book was that obviously I think this is the way that a lot of people get into it is I watched Apocalypse Now while I was in China because I had nothing to do. And I figured, oh, I'll just watch Apocalypse Now because it's famous. And my gosh, it was a good movie. There's going to be like a half Out of Darkness, half Apocalypse Now. I remember watching it, and originally I thought it was kind of like it's like I assume lots of like the Vietnam War stereotypes came from that movie. And so when I was watching it, it's like, I don't know, watching like Breaking Bad or something. It's like seeing like, oh, where do all the memes come from? Where does all the stuff come from? Then I watched it, and it was like amazing performances by like everyone, and it's just like the movie is just so like surreal. Like the whole thing. And then I heard that it was inspired by Joseph Conrad's book Heart of Darkness, and it was it just so happened to be that that I actually wanted to read it in the past. So, anyways, I got the book very, very short. This like with birth because at the start there's this like long, very, very long introduction and then like critical commentary. And then at the back there's also a Congo diary from when Joseph Conrad was in the Congo. And so the book is only about 90 pages in its totality. And so I read it in about, like a 2 hour sitting. But for the 90 pages that it's made of, it's very, very good. Okay. So it basically just details, just like Apocalypse Now, this character who goes on a mission to find sort of this runaway, this guy who's sort of gone rogue, doing his own thing, called Kurtz. While in the movie it's Colonel Kurtz. In this one it's just this guy, this like trader, this ivory trader called Kurtz. And so obviously the big difference is this one's in the Congo and not Vietnam. But the book, like it's just darkness basically penetrates every corner of this book. There's basically no part of this book that is not shrouded in this opaque sort of obsidianness, right? It's just like this incredible sort of I mean, really it's quite a like depressing book. Um so basically because it basically what it details is it tells this character who's in Britain at the start and then he goes to the Congo which is being absolutely it's being devastated by colonialism. Like the Belgians have gone to Congo and they're extracting all the resources. So in the book, there's all these parts where it's rusted, rotten machinery there, you know, terrible slavery and like lots of the N word. Um, like there's lots of sections that I probably can't read out on YouTube, but yeah, it's just there's some pretty horrific passages where it just describes, these like uh these managers of all these plants and stuff trying to extract as much resources and material, mainly ivory again, from the Congo. And they're using all the native people, native Congans, and they're using them for backbreaking labor. And there's lots of these scenes where he describes sort of looking out at this mass of what he describes as bronze bodies in the sun, and it's like, they're skinny, they're frail, and they're sick because they're overworked. And so what happens afterwards? So he stays there for a while. He sees all the stuff at sort of like the base camp kind of place. And then what happens is as he starts to look for Kurtz, he begins to go upriver. So he goes upriver, up the Congo River, which is I believe the deepest river in the world. And he goes up and he describes it. He describes it like a large serpent, right? And he's going up, he's going, and it's just as he goes deeper into the forest, as he goes further along the river, he sort of travels back in time. So at the start, we start at sort of what is when we're in England. This is like the ultimate sort of first world kind of at the time sort of man at his most developed in that sort of sense. And so he goes to Congo and he sees this sort of slightly less developed, sort of colonized, half colonized kind of, place, right? And then afterwards, as he goes up, he sort of goes into this ancient, very ancient forest that hasn't been, disturbed in millennia. It's just this ancient, dense jungle, which he, initially I think he describes when he lands as like almost black, and it's just dark green thickness. It's just so incredibly dense and so incredibly ancient. And so he's going up, and there's these faint remains of other white settlers and stuff like that. But there's not really much to be found. And so sort of the main thing that is sort of grappled with in this book is just sort of the duality of man, kind of. So it's sort of that, and this is what I grasp from the book is that there's a sort of civilized sort of man that he constructs. So the civilized man is sort of what the Western world especially at the time what held people up to be, right? And it's just sort of that, civilized the mannerly sort of what we see as people today. And there's this sort of ancient atavistic sort of like really early man thing that he finds in Congo, where as he descends up the jungle, you can almost feel like these instincts of just like bare base man is like his most stripped down form, right? At the very very base form, and that's sort of, and then it's just the sort of the thin shell that separates the two. Whereas while we think we're so distanced from like this sort of caveman, not caveman, but sort of ritualistic. Um, I watched some other videos about the thing, and basically, I think it was just like about how man was almost. I think it was about the golden bough. I think I watched the video, and it was just about how almost everything that um you know everything about culture and what we do now all stems from very very early ritual. So everything stemmed from man seeing something and attempting to recreate it as to make it happen. And so that is that sort of base form that he sees in the Congo. And then what he realizes is that uh, there's nothing that really separates the sort of elevated man, that knows, math, English, science, all these sort of higher abstract thoughts. There's nothing that really separates him from the sort of, you know, really early sort of undeveloped kind of human. And so that's what he sort of grapples with as he's on this adventure. And then afterwards, what he does is he keeps going upriver, and there's this conflict. They get shot at. There's that whole thing, and then he finally arrives at Kurtz's place after losing some of his members. Pardon me. And what happens is, so he goes up and he's greeted by this sort of fool character. He's what he is he's this Russian. I'm forgetting it now, but it's just like he's this young Russian who's sort of become obsessed with Kurtz. When he comes up to him, he says, like, Kurtz is this wise man. All I do is I listen to him. He's destined for big, he's great things. He's a great man. Like he knows things that other people don't. He sees more clearly, and he sort of provides a little bit of well, not so much relief, but he provides a little bit of comfort at first, sort of being a familiar civilized sight in this ancient jungle. But he also sort of acts as this sort of disturbing messenger and of this like sort of what kind of crazy thing is going on because what he sees not only is he sees this Russian guy is he also sees when he goes there he sees a like a head on a pike. So like this is going back to the most base, most barbaric kind of human in its earliest form kind of thing. He sees this head on the thing, and then he sees this is Kurtz's base. I think Kurtz is hauled out onto a stretcher, and basically, he finally after after this entire journey, he finally gets to see him. The main character. What happens is he like the entire thing. He really wants to see Kurtz, but the way he sees him is he sees him as a voice rather than sort of an image. Like there's a sort of passage that I don't know why it sticks in my mind very clearly, almost more than any of the other passages. Is that he talks about how he doesn't when he imagines meeting Kurtz finally, he doesn't imagine shaking his hand or seeing the man. What he imagines is a voice. And so Kurtz ends up becoming sort of this voice of reason, sort of the voice of like the voice of knowledge and the voice of just this entire like man cultural thing I was talking about. And he sort of expounds all this knowledge to him, all this knowledge to the main character. And there's a sort of dialogue about sort of having to, you know, and just like an apocalypse now, sort of about I think was like about embracing this other side. Like the reason Kurt's so successful is because he works with the people of Congo. He works with them as sort of this demigod. Well, not even demigod, just like a proper god. And he works with them that way, and that's how he gets the most ivory. And so that happens, and then Kurtz, he's in his final moments when the main character finally gets there. He's ailing, and then rather than Apocalypse Now, rather than him being murdered, he just sort of dies naturally. And then the main character returns home, and then his final words, Kurtz's final words, uh, horror, the horror, and it's just the horror of everything, of all that, of just. I'm not even that sure, to be honest, what he refers to when he talks about the horror, but that's that. And then so the main character returns home. He returns to England. He meets his wife, who Kurt's he hasn't seen in a long time. He's been in Congo, and so um, she's mourning, and then he tells her, your husband was a great man. He was always destined for big things. And she asks, what was his last words, and then at the very end he lies. He lies and he says, "Oh, he said your name," but in reality, what he said was the horror. It was the horror, and that's sort of that's how the book ends. It ends at the heart of darkness again. And this heart of darkness is sort of just this, it's this motif thing that's sort of repeated throughout the whole thing, where the heart of darkness is just, it can be anything. The heart of darkness could be, the heart of darkness of man, right? So it's like, that dark side, the dark side of the moon, the dark side of man, that flip, that switch, like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of like dynamic where there's that monster of that atavistic just early man hiding within us, that we could descend to at any time. Heart of darkness. It could also be, referring to Africa, referring to the Congo itself. It is at the very heart of Africa. It's in the middle. The darkness being the darkness of colonialism, of course. And so, you know, and there's so much, right? Like the sort of idea of this dark center of everything. It could be reality or truth or anything, of thought. There's this dark center to everything, right? What looks good or grand. The idea of like sort of uncovering a map, of trying to explore everything, trying to reach into the heart, right? Because part of the whole colonialism experiment was trying to just uncover every part of the earth, and in uncovering that, you unfurl the darkest parts of it. And so that's sort of breaching into the heart of darkness. The heart of darkness, where the drums, the ominous drums beat. That's another sort of motif throughout the whole thing. drums, and it's that sort of again, the drums act as a symbol of just the return to like that early basic sort of humanity. You know, the drums sort of it's this this deep bass kind of thing that's like penetrates within the soul, right? Like you think drums, you think sort of deep rumbling, this ominous kind of signaling, or something grander, something, or maybe not something grand, but something more deep within us, right? Like that idea. It's almost like the idea of drums can almost be sort of um related to just like human speech and stuff like that in itself, right? Like when you think about it, a high pitched voice and a low voice can have things like when you hear a low sound, it almost you feel it like a heavy bass. Like a heavy bass is going to feel very different to like a high, like yeah, a high note of something, right? Like a high note will hit you in the ears, and you'll feel that. But bass, you feel that throughout your whole body, reaching back into the heart of darkness. But yeah, that's sort of that's my impressions of the Heart of Darkness. Obviously, I could be wrong, and I read it in quite a rush, quite a haste, because I read books fast. Well, I don't know if it's that fast, but anyways, that's what I think. And it's also good to be back to uploading videos because I haven't done this in a while. So, yeah, see ya.